Shalom and welcome to Life Lessons. And we are on the 7th lesson, going all the way to the beginning of Genesis, Chumash Bereshit. And here we are in a very interesting Parashah section that's going to deal with Jacob. We began from the beginning with the creation, and we had discussed the Noach, that was 10 generations after Adam, and then the birth of Abraham, and Abraham coming to Israel, his son Isaac. So in a way, we find ourselves in the 3rd generation of the patriarch. This is Jacob. And this parasha becomes a very important lesson for us because the details of it is really about life in general and how we deal with it in our day by day. So to recap, by the end of last parasha, in Parashat Toldot, it speaks about how Yaakov needed to flee. Esau was after him, he was upset. So we have two perspectives in the end of Toldot. We have the mother's perspective that she wants to save her son Jacob, from the brother Esau. So she tells him, you're going to need to go to my brother Laban, till I'll send a message that you're fine, that you're okay to come back. Now, the father, Rivka's husband, Isaac, Yitzchok, approaches this whole thing from a positive point of view, because what we see here, he not necessarily has an idea, and if he had an idea, he's not mentioning it, about the danger that Jacob has from his brother. But he does call in his son, and he tells him, I don't like you to marry somebody here. I want you to go to the family. So you need to go to Haran and to the house of Besuel, that this is your mother's house. And over there, God will help and you will find the lucky one. Now, and he blesses him. And that's how we end last week, that Yaakov listened to his parents, and he left. Now, till this point, Yaakov, what we know about him is that he grew up in his parents' home. And the only thing that we know from before is that he was a person that sat in the tent the whole time. Means he was studious compared to his brother that was a hunter and out there in the fields. Jacob says remained inside, which this represents that he was basically homebound, studying and advancing, what we would say, in his connection with the Almighty and in his prayers and in his learnings. Then he gets interrupted by his mother, that his mother says, you know what, I overheard your father wants to bless the older son, Esau, but I think you deserve the blessing. And we know the story, she kind of arranged it that he should get the blessing instead of Esau. But all that is dealing not who Jacob is. So he's following his mother's order. This week, in this episode, in this Parashat Vayeitzei, that's when Jacob is his own man. Because he had to leave and he's on his own. He had to go, fleeing from his brother, listening to what his father says, go find yourself a wife by your mother's family, And as we read in this week's episode, he arrives in Haran all alone. And according to our sages, not just all alone, with nothing to his name, just what he is wearing. It says he had a very tough journey until he arrived. He had nothing to him. And we have the story here, how he meets Rachel by the well. And she tells him who she is. She's the daughter of Laban. And we begin with the whole story, how Laban, he works for Laban. And we find out how Laban tricks him. First, he promised him that he will work for me 7 years, and I will give you my daughter as salary. And then when it comes to the wedding, when he's supposed to get married, Rachel, as everyone knows, Laban tricks and puts Leah, the other sister, in instead of Rachel. A little bit of a disappointment for Jacob. However, Jacob decides to move on and works for another 7 years to be able to have Rachel. Then majority of his children are born. So 20 years in total of the life of Jacob outside of Israel is all in this section. So it's dealing with Jacob that he needs to rely on very strong powers. In other words, that's what we see here. His faith and his belief in God becomes here very, very important. Because happens to be this Laban that is his uncle and his father-in-law is not a straight fellow. And he has to deal with it. And he deals with it, and we see towards the end of the section that we're soon going to come back to it, is where Yaakov had to flee from Laban's house, where he said, enough is enough. But what's important is what our sages tell us, that this whole story of Jacob leaving the Holy Land, because the verse tells us right away in the beginning, Jacob left Beersheba, this is in Israel, and went towards Haran. So that means he left a holy place and he went to Haran, where the sages describe Haran as an expression, the fierce anger of God. This was a place where it was totally the opposite of good behavior. And that's where he ends up. There's no surprise while Laban is such a tricker and with this kind of a behavior. This is what the mentality in that place was, and this is where Jacob comes, and from there he's going to fish out the best, the good ones, that this is going to be the daughters, Rachel and Leah, and take them out. However, that's not a simple task, and as Jacob himself, when he's complaining to Laban, and says, and you continue to trick me all the time. Anything you promised, the next day you changed it. He changed his salary 10 times. He wasn't honest at all. And that's who he was dealing with. And over the year, that's where he got married. And that's where he brought up a family. This becomes a very important lesson of survival. The lesson of Jacob is how is to survive in an environment that sometimes is not so friendly and is sometimes even more than that, an obstacle to our service to the Almighty. One of the great sages, known the Or HaChaim, comes and says that all these verses have deep meanings to it. So when we read that Jacob left from Beersheba, that this means he left from a holy place to go to a place that is not so holy, that also represents in a way the birth of each one of us when we are born in this world, So it says we have a soul inside us. The soul that exists inside us comes from all the way up, from heaven. Means it comes from a spiritual place, from a godly place. So this point that this is the life, because the physical body that we have on its own has no life. When the soul departs, there's no life there. So the soul is the source of life. But now imagine from the point of view of the soul, it comes from a place that is holy, from a place that is spiritual, and all of a sudden it is stuck in the boundaries and the limitations of a physical body. And wants, from the point of view of the soul, only wants to do wonderful things. However, that's where the evil inclination gets involved, as the sages tell us, because the body has its own desires. And if we don't succeed, and we could say a lot of us may fall in that category that takes time sometimes to succeed 100%. So it is a daily struggle with our inclinations. Our sages call it the evil inclination because to describe the situation, because we need to know, because just like this, in a matter of a few minutes, we could make a decision that could be so harmful to our being, and we don't realize it. So therefore, we need to be on guard all the time, especially with the influence of the environment around us, to stay pure and not to let ourselves to be influenced by others, but the other way around. We should be the one, we, the good people, should be the one to influence others. And not just to sit on the side and say, well, I don't care what's going on as long as I secure myself, because there's no such a thing, I just secure myself. As we know for ourselves very well, if I'm only going to care just about myself, so not only that it's going to end up that I'm not going to be caring about myself, it's going to be hurtful and detrimental to my situation. The only way is if I am making a decision to go out and influence, that helps me to be strong. Our sages tell us, and this is a very important point, the only way to be successful is if we constantly think to ourselves, I need to help others. I need to become a role model. I need to teach other people. If I know something wonderful and something positive, I need to share it with other people. If I keep it just for myself, besides the point that I'm not helping anyone else, I'm not helping myself either, because then my security is not so strong. When we have self-confidence, and this is what helps us, when we have self-confidence, we are so sure in what we believe, then you feel comfortable to giving the message to others. But when you're not so sure about what you believe, and you don't know how to give the message, in a way it's saying that you yourself are not so sure about what you believe. And that's what we see a lot of times, is when a person has the confidence and he believes in what he's doing, gets up there, gives out the message, speaks about what they believe, that's a whole different story. Jacob, in a deeper sense, needed to deal with all this because he's away from home. There's no father, there's no mother. In those days, you couldn't text, you couldn't email, you couldn't do WhatsApp and all these things that exist today. So he is basically on his own. And that taught him a very important lesson. And what we see throughout the whole Parsha, the strength and the faith and the belief, that becomes very important here. So right away, as he's leaving, he has a vision and God appears to him. And what is his vision? He sees a ladder. And it's interesting, the description of the verse. There's a ladder that reaches to the ground, but the head goes all the way up to the sky. What does it mean the head goes all the way to the sky? We know the sky is something, physically speaking, very hard to reach there. It's especially in those days, to say they didn't have NASA to fly all the way up there. So obviously we're talking here, spiritually speaking, that this is what it means when a person is grounded and he's standing strong on the ground. But where's his head? His head is always looking up to heaven. Then it's a full picture. Then that's a perfect connection, because he's not off the ground, because a lot of times, sometimes we could feel very good about ourselves, but it could be imagination. We may be like flying angels on top of the ground, and we're not touching the ground. Then we won't really be able to influence anyone. People will say, this guy is too much of an angel for us. God created us human beings to deal with human beings with the help of all the spiritual powers, that this is what the angels are all about. But we need to be with our feet on the ground and connected to heaven. So this is what Yaakov is receiving here. The first night he's out of his parents' home, and he's going to face this amazing task and hard task. He has a dream. And we know a lot of times is, what does a person dream? What he thinks about a whole day. What's bothering a person during the day, this is what most of the times what he's going to be dreaming about. And what does he dream? An appearance of angels going up and down of the ladder. And the ladder is not just a simple ladder, touching the ground and going all the way to the sky to bring out this point. And then just like this, as we would say, out of the blue, God appears to him. We have to understand, till this point, we never had an appearance of God to Jacob. We know that God had appeared to Adam. We know that God had appeared to Noah. We know God had appeared to Abraham. We know God had appeared to Isaac. This is now the new generation. And this new generation, all of a sudden, you could only imagine for Jacob that he's in total shock. So he grew up in a home that spoke about God, and he knew he had an awesome grandfather by the name Abraham and a grandmother by the name Sarah, and he knew that his parents are very special, but that he should all of a sudden be the continuation of this link, of this message, that you could almost say he wasn't so aware till that point. When he made the decision to leave and go out there in the world, not just in the place where it's holy. That's easy. In a place where you're holy to be holy, what's the problem? There's no challenges. When he made the decision, I'm going out and I'm going to listen, this is what I'm going to do, that's when God appears to him. And he tells him, I'll be with you. I will watch you. Wherever you go, I will bring you back, because I won't let you go till I fulfill everything that I commanded to Abraham and Isaac. So he becomes now the third link after Abraham, Isaac, in continuing this message of God into the world. And how amazing it is when Yaakov wakes up. The verse says to us, Yaakov woke up from his sleep and said, God is truly in this place, and I didn't even realize. He says, would I have known that? I wouldn't have gone to sleep here. So in Jacob's mind is, this is a holy place. How could you put yourself sleep on a holy place where God appears to you? So it's a total shock for him. Says, I didn't even know that this is a place of God. Interesting what its sages tell us, because it helps us to understand that place later on became the place for the temple in Jerusalem. That place where Jacob slept there that night, this is the place where later on they build the temple and it was the Holy of Holies with the ark and all the vessels and everything that existed. And Jacob responds, and he says, yes, God, if you will be with me, and you'll watch me, as he said, and you will bring me peacefully back home. This idea, you'll bring me peacefully back home. In other words, this is the idea that when, in a deeper sense, when the soul leaves this world, after all the work that has been done in this world, that he could say to himself, the person could say to themselves, I am pure as I began. And this is a hard task sometimes, but this is what Jacob is saying here. And I will return peacefully. In the simple meaning, I will return peacefully to my father's house after I come back for my journey. In a deeper sense, our sages tells us, he's also talking about the soul. The soul's journey here in this world with all its challenges, but it doesn't give in. It overcomes all these challenges and able to come back peacefully back home. So that is a very important message. This is how it starts. So he knows, if I am going to do the right thing, I got God with me all the time. So the message of Jacob is not just a lesson about what happened to him. It is a lesson for all the descendant to come. And we continue reading about what happened to Jacob and in his relationship with Laban. And there's a very interesting point here. As we know that Jacob ran away. He took his wife and kids one day. It says he worked for him 14 years. And then there was another 6 years because Laban asked him to stay. So total was 20 years. And he picked himself up and left. Laban did not like it. He found out. So he pursued. He went after him. He ran after him. So when he comes to him, he meets up with him. Laban says to Yaakov, what have you done? What have you done? You ran away from me. There's a whole discussion here. And what's interesting here, and this is a lot of times what we see, Laban is the abuser. He abused him. Well, a lot of times in life we see, and it's amazing how all these lessons are in the Torah is, that a lot of times what abusers do, they make themselves believe that they are the victim. And then that's very challenging. So in other words, when he starts complaining, what are you doing? He says, they turn things around and they make you believe like they are the victim. So Laban turns to him, why did you run away? And you didn't let me. I would have kissed them all. I would have sent you away with songs, with a feast. You didn't let them kiss me. And he uses the language here, and now, going have you gone, a double expression, because desired have you desired to go to your father's house. And then we really have it where Jacob really gives it back to him and says, I'm 20 years with you, worked very hard, day and night, and what have you done? You abused, you changed my salary so many times. If not God, he tells him, if not God of my father that was with me all the time, things will really have been bad. It's only because the support of him, that's why I survived. The interesting point here, what Laban says. Laban answers to Jacob, and he says to him after listening all this, and here is the point I'm trying to bring out. Here's the point of the abuser. He says, the daughters are my daughters. The sons are my sons. This is the kids of Jacob. The flocks are my flocks. all that you see is mine. This is a quoting from the verse here. All that you see is mine. Instead of answering, this is what he says. But that's what the problem is with Laban, and a lot of times that way. When you let a person to abuse and you don't put a stop to it, they turn things around and they even start feeling that maybe everything belongs to them. They're in charge and they could do whatever we want. We find something very interesting. Towards the end of the Parshat, there was a treaty because Yaakov did not answer him back. It's like almost saying, these are the facts. I left. Finished. This is the way it is. So they made a treaty, and from that on, Laban went back, and everything, as we would say, was dandy again. You know why? Because Laban is back home, and Yaakov went back to Israel, as we're going to see. This is a very important point. A very important point that we learn from this is, we shouldn't let ourselves, because many times in our service to God, we may have people that make fun of us, and almost seems like that someone is trying to abuse their power over us. And we need to stand strong in our belief, because we know that God is helping us. And with the faith in God, this is what we learn with Jacob, to stand fast, and God helps us that we could survive our mission and really say that I'm going to return peacefully home very soon for all of us, going back to the Holy Land with the coming of the righteous Mashiach. Thank you.